My fellow Americans,
what do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun. It's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Is the US a functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They have 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Yes. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the major's. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
But these were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Wednesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media and the corporate media largely ignore. And we are going to talk about what's going on in Ukraine because it looks like the West is pushing for a frozen conflict. The idea that we would just divide Ukraine, keep it as it is, allow NATO to turn Ukraine into a massive aircraft carrier, a garrison state. This, as the counteroffensive, has about 44 or 43 days left, according to General Mark Milley, in order to accomplish anything. So Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to join us to discuss the very latest there.
Plus, Congress is accusing the CIA of covering up COVID origins. Why? Who did that? Also, us as American taxpayers, we paid for that. We bribed scientists to do that through the CIA. Did you remember wanting to use your money that way? Because you did. We're going to bring you that story.
Plus, in Canada, get ready for mask mandates. The health minister there basically saying, hey, we'll be prepared to be locked up, ankle bracelets, tracking if you're not using masks. And that's what the Canadian government really, really wants, is vaccines once again and mask mandates back in Canada. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. And we've got some alien bodies. We had to include this story in the show because in front of the Mexican Congress, this is literally in front of Congress, wheeling out alien bodies to show them right in front of Congress. Yeah, you want to see bodies? Well, get the gurney. Let's wheel them out and let's show members of Congress what these alien bodies actually look like. They say they're alien bodies. They say they have the DNA proof that such a thing is the case and that these are over 1,000 years old. We're going to show you the footage. We're going to show you the testimony under oath in the Mexican Congress in just moments.
All right, all of that and more. But first, we want to tell you about our newsletter over at redacted.inc. This is a free newsletter. It's a place where you can read a lot of the stories that we talk about here on the show for yourself. It's also a great place to go for links to the things that we talk about so that you can take your own reading of these topics. You can use it as a place to store these links because you know that a lot of times these links change. Headlines change. The media hides things from us, especially when they accidentally tell the truth. So it's a great place for you to archive your news. It's also just a great place for you. It could be a study guide for you to come to the show. Again, it's at redacted.inc and it's totally free. You just have to put in your email address and then click that authentication email to make sure that we can email you every day. It comes out every day that this show is live, Monday through Thursday. And again, it is meant to be informative. It's meant to be a little bit fun. It comes to you in the same sort of spirit as we do here on this show. We hope you appreciate it. Again, it's totally free. So please do sign up at redacted.inc to the Redacted newsletter. One more time, you can find it for yourself at redacted.inc.
Well, time is running out for Ukraine's vaunted counteroffensive. Those are the words of General Mark Milley, as President Zelensky says Russia has basically stopped anything that NATO has been throwing at them, sort of admitting really that they really haven't made much of an advancement at all. In other words, his counteroffensive has been a total failure. That's, you don't need to mince words about it. Let's bring in Colonel Douglas Macgregor to get some analysis on this. And Colonel, good to see you. Putin says today in this kind of big speech that everyone's talking about that Ukraine has lost 71,000 soldiers during this counteroffensive that achieved nothing. What do you make of that? 71,000 soldiers killed just during the counteroffensive on the Ukrainian side. Do those numbers sound accurate to you?
Well, they're certainly plausible because about 4 weeks ago, literally a month ago, we counted over 60,000 dead. And that's based on satellite photography, looking at bodies lying on the ground, looking at cemeteries that are filling up, and also receiving reports from on the ground inside Ukraine about the masses of dead and horribly wounded people. So I think it's plausible. Can I confirm it? I can't. But I would say that the Russians have been far, far closer to the truth when they report casualties than the Ukrainians have.
General Mark Milley is saying that this time is running out here. He basically says that we've seen some gains, we're some good progress here. And he said, I said at the very beginning of this that this was going to be long, slow, hard, high casualty producing. That's exactly what it is. But he thinks that there's confidence. He has a lot of confidence that, Ukraine is going to break through in the next 45 days or so before the bad weather sets in. What do you make of Mark Milley's comments?
Well, setting aside whether or not anybody wants to listen to Mark Milley, I haven't heard the truth from that man's mouth for years. He's the ultimate political puppet. And that's, of course, what the current swamp administration in Washington wants. Someone who goes along, questions nothing, and supports the status quo. Milley is a fraud, so I would just forget anything he says. The truth of the matter is as follows. The counteroffensive has been a catastrophe. Whether it's 71,000 or 69,000, I don't know. It doesn't make any difference. The equipment losses are horrendous. And all of this is for various reasons. Number one, Ukrainian forces are trained to fight like NATO. NATO, and especially the United States Armed Forces, are organized to refight some version of World War II. And we're up against a 21st century military establishment, which is organized very differently. And no one has been willing to accept this reality. And that's the biggest problem. Right now, you have persistent surveillance all over Ukraine, from space-based assets down to terrestrial assets that allow the Russians, through their intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets, to see everything in Ukraine all of the time. We have not disrupted their satellite-based capabilities for the simple reason that if we do that, they will destroy ours. We don't want to lose ours. So it's been a game. We try to race information to the Ukrainians as quickly as possible that they can exploit, but they're not organized to exploit it. The Russians are simply organized in a way that maximizes the value of their strike assets. Strike assets, artillery, rockets, missiles, drones, you name it. And these are very plentiful on the Russian side. The Russians have always appreciated the criticality of maintaining large quantities of strike weapons. They've got them in practically limitless numbers. You link those to all of these overhead surveillance capabilities, and then you have an automatic warfare capability. Something moves towards your lines, something seems to be threatening. A group of Ukrainians assemble. They bring in additional equipment. It's all detected, it's targeted, and then at a time and a place that is convenient for the Russians, they are destroyed. We failed to come to terms with this reality. People say, well, this is starting to look like World War I. Well, it's much worse than World War I. In World War I, people still didn't know what was happening behind the other person's trench line. Today, the Russians know exactly what's going on in Ukraine. And they've decided to simply sit and let the Ukrainians impale themselves. The question is, how much longer do they sit? And I can tell you there are large numbers of senior officers in Moscow, senior Russian officers, and a lot of Russian political leaders who are extremely uncomfortable with Putin's determination to, for the moment, wait. Putin has been very deliberate and very cautious. People have had it in Moscow. They say, come on, President Putin, it's time to end this thing. Crush these people, get it over with. And their point is very simple. If they don't do that, their concern is that we will be tempted to do something stupid, like intervene in Western Ukraine, or simply give the Ukrainians more capability, which is, of course, what we're doing. Now, it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the direction of the war. But the point is, if you do nothing for as long as the Russians have, in other words, simply sit behind your defenses, annihilate your enemy, as attractive as that is, people begin to wonder, well, I guess the Russians can't attack. What's wrong with them? Why don't they attack? Well, it's a deliberate decision by President Putin. He does not want a war with us. And he's afraid that if he rapidly advances on Kiev, closes the gap between his forces and the Dnieper River, that we will interpret that as threatening and suddenly intervene. I think he's wrong. I think our opportunity to intervene is over. And I think behind the scenes, the American military establishment and the other military establishments in NATO know they cannot defeat this capability which the Russians have perfected. We're still organized for a form of warfare that is anachronistic. It's called World War II.
You write a new piece in the American Conservative, a new opinion piece out called War, Money, and America's Future, Why the Uniparty Risking a War We're So Ill Prepared to Fight. Why is the Uniparty risking a war we're so ill prepared to fight? And what is the NATO-U.S. strategy then? If we're bleeding Europe to death, crushing them under sanctions by trying to place these sanctions against Russia. Europe is being crushed. The United States is being crushed. We could hit double-digit interest rates on the real estate front of the United States, wages continuing to decline, and unemployment continuing to go up on the United States side. So what is Washington's proxy war endgame here? Is it to just sit and continue to funnel money and weapons into this war zone in perpetuity? Or do they actually have an end game?
Well, remember that the original purpose of this entire operation was to bleed Russia to death. No,
right.
It was to harm their economy, wear them out, exhaust their resources. Well, that was absurd. And the opposite has happened. Our resources are being exhausted. Right now, we know, and I'm sure you saw this in the article, and this is something a lot of Americans need to understand, that the amount of money it takes us to service the debt is now equal to our defense budget, roughly $1 trillion. How much longer can you do this? And I think that's something else that Putin, who is an economist, remember the man has a doctorate in economics, he's been watching this. And I think he's been betting heavily that not only America's economy or financial system is going to go into crisis, but I think he's expecting the Europeans to simply slide into recession or depression or worse, and that will bring an end to this conflict, at which point in time he can advance without much opposition. I mean, we already know the Ukrainians have no more manpower, per se. I mean, they've turned to the European Union, they've turned to the various governments in NATO and said, we want you to repatriate military-age males from all over your countries back to the Ukraine so that we can feed them into the meat grinder and kill them as well. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I was really depressed when I discovered that the Irish Republic had agreed to do it. But I think in Poland and other countries, there's a reluctance to do that because they feel they may face armed opposition inside their own countries from Ukrainians that say, no, I'm not going back. I'm not prepared to die. So I think we've already hit the end game. The question is, as you put it, what are we going to do? And Nuland and Blinken apparently flew off recently and said, oh, let's freeze the conflict. Well, that's a non-starter. The Russians have been telling us for months, forget it. They're not going to do that.
What does that mean, freeze the conflict? What does that entail?
Well, I think what they believe it entails is something like a divided Korea, that you come to some sort of agreement along the line of contact and you say, we'll stay on this side, you stay on that side. They see it in the West, particularly in Washington, as a face-saving measure. The Russians aren't going to do it. What the Russians will not accept is any Ukrainian state of any kind that is aligned with NATO. Number one, can't happen.
Right.
Otherwise, they fought this war for no purpose. Remember, this is all about the existential threat that we present inside Ukraine to Russia. So that's out of the question. And the issue is, how do you turn to the Russians if you're in Washington in front of the American people and in front of your allies and say, look, we were wrong. You aren't weak. And we've got serious problems at home. We've got to pack it in, go home, and take care of our own problems. Well, in their minds, they've just been defeated. They've admitted that they have to surrender and walk away. So in Washington, to get back to your original question, what are you going to do? You just double down and continue to do the stupid things that have failed utterly to produce any success. So send them more ATACMS missiles, send them German Taurus missiles, send whatever somebody else has got out there, especially since you know they don't have any troops to speak of. So send them long-range attack weapons that only require a few trained people, and then let them launch them to their heart's content at the Russians. And of course, again, they're going to attack Russian civilians in Russian towns and cities. We know that. They've done that before. This is insane. This is crazy, but that's where we are.
I'll get you out of here on this, Colonel, which is, again, this 45-day weather window that General Milley mentioned, 30 to 45 days or so. What happens, do you believe, in this 45 days on the Russian side? And what happens after that 45-day window closes?
Well, that's the question that none of us can actually answer to our satisfaction. And that's what I said at the beginning. I was talking to some friends in Europe that just returned from Moscow, and they're very well connected. They're actually in the journalistic community, and they said that in talking to senior Russian officials as well as senior military men on the general staff, the Russian attitude is, look, let's get this over with. Please, President Putin, let us attack. They've got 300,000 troops in reserve. It's not as though they don't have the capability to launch. And again, President Putin has chosen to wait. I think he truly believes that the situation in Europe will get so bad that NATO will simply crumble. People will simply say, well, we followed you as far as we can, Washington, and you've led us down the path to hell. Germany is being deindustrialized. One of the leading CEOs of one of the biggest chemical companies in Germany, and remember, these are industries that lead the world in many capabilities, has said, it's over. We're shutting down. We're being deindustrialized. So I think Putin has said, well, why don't we wait for Europeans to wake up, French and Germans particularly? But there is a fight in Moscow. It's not a fight in the sense that we would understand it, where people are yelling and screaming at each other. But behind the scenes, there is a big debate. Why wait? Let's get it over with. And Putin has been reluctant to do that for the reasons that we've outlined. So nobody really knows the answer at this point to your question.
If you were in a bizarro world, if you happened to be an advisor to President Putin, if it were, again, a bizarro world or an alternative dimension, and you were giving advice to Putin whether to sit back and wait, watch Europe crumble, the United States crumble, or to take action and launch these 300,000, what would you do as a military advisor?
Well, a lot of people ask me that question. I don't care to go to jail as a traitor to the American people. So I'm not going to advise President Putin, plus the fact he's done pretty well. I mean, the Russian casualties have been very low. His force is in excellent shape. He's coming out of this smelling like a rose. So I really think it's up to him. And he hasn't done badly. He's done very, very well. We're the ones who are in serious trouble. And the real issue is, what do we do? We've talked in the past about the border. The border is open. We don't know who's coming in there. Millions of people are pouring in. They're not an asset to us. They're going to be a burden to us. It's only a question of how much longer before we have an explosion inside the United States. I'm sure that President Putin is aware of that as well. So the situation in the West is terrible. And under those circumstances, it may be prudent for him to do what he's done, but he does have pressure on him. I can't advise him. And I imagine there are a lot of people that say, well, I'd like Putin to do X, but he's done pretty well thus far. And so I probably want to shut up and color until something goes horribly wrong, but I don't think it will.
I said I was going to get you out of here on that last question, but I will on this one. You see Europe now getting letters from the Ukrainian government or people in different European countries now, as you mentioned, parts of Ireland, of course. We've seen this, I think, now in Italy, and there's other countries that, of course, are also stepping up, saying they're going to repatriate these Ukrainians who have sought refuge there, send them back to the meat grinder. Do you think, now remember, the United States had given preferential treatment to Ukrainian refugees coming across the border. In fact, we know firsthand, in fact, that there were people that were waiting to move into the United States, or sitting, waiting, and Ukrainians got front of the line status to be able to come into the United States. Do you think there's a chance in hell that the United States would repatriate, send these young Ukrainian men back to Ukraine to fight?
I think it's unlikely. I mean, let's be frank, we can't even enforce our own laws. We aren't defending our own borders. We are not expelling illegals. We're not taking action against hardened criminals that are raping and murdering in our major cities. So what are we going to do? I think we're going to do exactly what the Biden administration has done, nothing. So I don't see us playing in this. Now, the Europeans have got to ask themselves whether or not they want to be war criminals, because they're essentially rounding up people and sending them back to die. This has no chance of success, and that's the point in the article. We are organized for the past. This is a different form of warfare. We can't overcome it at the moment. The smart thing to do when you realize you're up against something fundamentally new that you haven't seen before and don't know how to defeat is to fall back, reconsider, find a different way forward, and then re-engage at some future point in time. But there is no reason in this administration. There's no rationality. Everything is out of control. We are a runaway locomotive headed down the side of a mountain to absolute certain destruction. We see it on the financial side, the economic side, the human side here inside the United States. It's true for Western Europe. Under those circumstances, it's back to Putin. Why should he act if we're doing a fine job of destroying ourselves?
Yeah, great point. Great point. I would encourage all of our viewers to go and read the Colonel's new opinion piece in the American Conservative. It's theamericanconservative.com. We'll link it up in the description below. Colonel, as always, great to see you. Thank you so much for catching up with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, our thanks to Colonel McGregor for joining us, as always. Great to have him here. We've got a lot more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to look at the CIA cover-up. Congress accusing the CIA of covering up COVID origins. Boy, the CIA has had a banner year of lies and deceit. I guess it's right in their wheelhouse. We will get to that. Plus, we're going to look at these alien bodies in Mexico in front of the Mexican Congress, bringing out these alien bodies from a journalist and scientists who say they've got the DNA evidence to prove that these are non-human biological beings. We'll show it to you. I don't have the evidence. We're going to show it to you, and you can make your own determination of what these things are. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Indeed, because the thing about running your own business is that every single hire counts, and no hiring partner understands that like Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. So don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessment, and virtual interviews. Plus, chances are, if you have a job opening, you can't afford to wait. That's why Indeed's U.S. data shows that over 80% of Indeed's employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Candidates that you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to U.S. Indeed data. So Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. It's not a black hole where you get people who have no idea what your job is, just spamming you with your resume. No, it's targeted and you get what you paid for, which is what you came for. Indeed knows that hiring needs to be cost-effective when you're running your own business. So that's why you can go to Indeed.com/redacted to start hiring right now. Just let them know that you heard it from us. Go to Indeed.com/redacted. Thank you for supporting the sponsors of this show. One more time, it's Indeed.com/redacted. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right. Well, the CIA worked to hide the origins of COVID. This is an allegation from 2 investigative bodies in Congress. It's not conspiracy, folks. Now, we maybe don't think that that sounds so out of bounds anymore, because we've seen so much information proving that Dr. Fauci and his colleagues, who are WHO scientists, have also manipulated the studies about the core of COVID origin, saying, just say it didn't come from a lab. Make that unlikely. Say that it's zoonotic is what they call it, that it came from some type of animal. We know that happened, right? Now, this all comes, this revelation about the CDC or the CIA. I'm going to get my acronyms, my initialisms messed up. This comes as the CDC voted to recommend the new COVID vaccine to all persons over 6 months of age. That means that the federal government will pay for this once again. So these two things can't be related. We're going to follow the investigation and follow the money, because the money seems to show us the narrative of COVID, and we can't stop it from happening again if we don't know about it, right? So first to the CIA and the CDC, and then to the CDC. So the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, that's the House Committee and the Senate Committee, released a statement on Tuesday saying that the CIA hid the origins of COVID. Here's specifically what it says. It says that they had a credible, high-level CIA whistleblower who came to them and said that 7 members of the CIA were assigned to a task force to analyze the COVID-19 origins. 6 of them said that the virus likely came from a lab. Then the CIA, now notice the word here, allegedly offered financial incentives to these 6 investigators, who then changed their mind and change their conclusion in favor of zoonotic origin. Now, the letter here, it says allegedly offered, but in the letter from Chairman Brad Wenstrup and Mike Turner to the CIA, it said that money was given, not offered. So I'm going to conclude here that that money went out, that that's a sunk cost, that it was paid by American taxpayers to scientists to change their conclusion, because that's the linchpin. They thought that it was from a lab, they received some money, and all of a sudden they thought that it was zoonotic. Okay, whose money? You and me, if you are an American taxpayer. Now, keep in mind, we've heard from several government organizations now saying that COVID did likely come from a lab. The Pentagon doctors said that that was plausible in 2020. The FBI said that last year. The Department of Energy said so last year. The CIA has been a holdout. Now it seems they had a reason to say that it did not come from a lab, because they paid some scientists for that conclusion, is what this whistleblower is saying. And now Congress says it seems likely that that's true. Why would they do that? Who asked them to do that?
Right. What is the reason behind it? I mean, we can use our conspiratorial minds here to figure out why would the CIA use money that they say was given, not bribes, but that's exactly what it was for, right? It was a bribe to get these scientists to change their story, to say that, I mean, it could be that the United States, absolutely has this love relationship with China, right?
Well, the reason that we've sort of been following up is because the National Institute of Health was funding gain of function in Wuhan.
Right.
And that seems to be something that we did not want to be known. That's why we know that Fauci and the NIH worked with the authors of the Nature paper to conclude that it was not likely to have come from a lab. We know that.
Yeah, they were collaborating on this.
We've seen that from these very committees.
So maybe we want to cover our trail here.
But why would the CIA do that? At the behest of who? Who were they protecting here?
Who came to them? It wasn't just something they cooked up out of thin air, right?
Right.
And my question is, what's the chain of command? Like, who actually is in control of the CIA? Like, are they just their own thing that does their own thing whenever they want? Or like, there has to be a chain of command. So that had to go up how far?
You would think that the director of the CIA, right, Bill Burns, you would think that he's a Biden appointee, and that, he serves at the pleasure of the president, right? So as a new president comes in, they make the decision they're going to put a new person in the head of the FBI, the new person at the head of the CIA, or they're going to continue with the person who was under the past administration, but they serve at the pleasure of the president, and they can be fired at any time. But there is absolutely a deep state that's totally out of control of the director of the CIA. Do you think that everyone at the CIA listens to him? There's absolutely an apparatus that's at work where they're secretly funding and pushing through all sorts of black ops projects that the director has no idea about.
Right. So the question here that we ask often is the legal concept of cui bono, right? Who benefits from this? From using American taxpayer money to pay scientists to change their mind. It's not us, the taxpayers. We don't benefit from manipulation of science ever. We don't benefit from our money being used that way. So who then benefits? It's somebody's reputation being saved. Now, the Senate committee is asking to interview the CIA COO, Andrew Makridis, and they're asking him to appear voluntarily before Congress on September 26th. So he would know the money trail. If these scientists were paid some kind of bonus, that would maybe be in a paper trail. They want to know, right? They're also asking for all communication, and they say if they don't get it, all about COVID from the CIA, and if they don't get it, they're saying they're ready to subpoena, and they have the power to do that. So this is interesting. So we've seen now the FBI subpoenaed by this Congress. These committees, now we might see the CIA pulled in next. So this is just literally one way to follow the money. Who was paid to lie to us?
Yeah.
We paid our own officials to tell us lies. I don't like that. I don't find that to be a part of my social contract with the government, and I hate it. Let me know what you think.
I would love to know also who else was getting money from the CIA. Who else was Dr. Fauci being paid? I mean, he was already getting a huge government salary, but was he being paid under the table? Was he being told what to say and directed in certain ways? What media organizations or people that were appearing on CNBC or other places on a regular basis? Like, was the CIA making sure that they were receiving money, not directly from the CIA, but through proxy organizations like USAID and these other sort of proxy organizations that we know are have been funding money into gain of function research, specifically in Ukraine. So all of these dirty sons of bitches. It'd be really interesting to see where this money, will they be forthcoming? Will they actually come forward and actually tell us that here's the documents, here's where the money went? Do you really think the CIA is going to go before Congress?
Specifically, then they'll also ruin 6 scientists' lives too, because this whistleblower said there were 7 scientists. 6 of them changed their mind after they were given money. 1 of them did not. Like the Dentine commercial, right? And so 6 scientists will have their names dragged through the mud as scientists who are willing to sell their science.
I would love to know the one scientist that had the scruples to say, no, I'm not going to alter my science or my belief system in order to take money from the CIA.
I think we will know that.
They probably still would have had to give him money, though, to not say anything. Or what'd they do? Have him, remove his science badge?
Let's see if
he didn't
that
take money. I mean, if he's saying if he's standing by his statements on this, or what his findings are, that it clearly came from a lab.
And also, didn't you say that did you say the COO of the CIA, as in they have a corporate structure? So won't we see all this in their tax returns?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah. Can you explain? I noticed here in column 5 that there's $20 billion missing. Can you explain where that money went? Oh, okay. You can't. Yeah. Does that get funneled to some Ukrainian biolab?
I don't recall. I'll have somebody look into that, and we'll get back to you.
Could you imagine?
No.
Could you imagine if your taxes were answered that way? I just don't recall. There's $20 billion that we can't account for, or $100 billion.
So I'm going through this wording of the statement, and it does seem to suggest that the 7th person refused the money and refused to change.
Good for her, him, whatever.
Good for that person.
They.
We don't know who they were. So, okay, that's one way to follow the money. Now let's follow the money for COVID vaccines. This is a currently unfolding story because this week the CDC voted to recommend the new COVID vaccine to all persons over 6 months of age. This means that the federal government will once again pay Big Pharma for these vaccines. Big Pharma will turn around and pay the U.S. government because they are licensing pieces of it from the NIH. We've followed that trail before. So this is the U.S. government basically laundering money through COVID vaccines. You take it, they launder money. Again, the chain goes, the federal government will pay Big Pharma. Big Pharma pays the federal government back for licensing those technologies. It's all laundered through your bicep, basically. Okay, so here's their announcement of this from the CDC. This comes just on the heels of the FDA making this recommendation. So they came in and said, yep, us too, rubber stamp. Now, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating that this is odd, given that the CDC admits that vaccination is a risk factor for contracting the new variant of COVID. We showed you this in late August when they said so, saying BA.2.86 may be more capable of causing infection to people who have received COVID vaccines. So take that if you want, but you're going to get COVID. It's also odd, this recommendation, given that young people don't seem to show any increased risk for severe COVID. Also odd because these vaccines did not go through clinical trials at all. In fact, Pfizer, the FDA, the CDC, and Moderna all say that they use studies from the first two COVID vaccines to say that this one is totally fine. They did not test this one on its own. They felt like they had no need. Also odd because Pfizer and Moderna both acknowledge in the new vaccine fact sheet that goes with these new vaccines that the COVID vaccine has serious adverse events and that the possible side effects are still being studied. Also odd because, again, no clinical trials. And the FDA even admitted that in their studies, which were not trials, but studies, the only thing they can do is suggest that the COVID vaccine works to neutralize the virus. We showed you this on Monday. The studies suggest that the vaccines are good. They don't have any kind of percentage of how often it prevents infection or serious COVID. No more percentages that we got in late 2019, late 2020, early 21, when the vaccines were being rolled out, when we had like Pfizer is 80%, AstraZeneca is high 60s. Remember that? No, that's gone because they can't hold and we know now that was all BS. So why this blanket recommendation of the vaccine for an entire population, regardless of medical history? At least in the UK, the government is only recommending the new vaccines for specific at-risk populations. In Canada, health officials approved only the Moderna vaccine and not the Pfizer one. Now, why would they do that, do you think? Could it be, I don't know, because Moderna has a huge factory they just built in Canada late last year.
Cui bono.
Yes, cui bono. Very
Cui bono.
good. Yes, very good. Here is Prime Minister Trudeau at the opening of said factory last year, looking really excited about it.
And looking real, he's like, I got my work boots on, my brand new work boots that have never worked a day in their life. They're completely brand new and shiny.
You definitely need steel-toed boots when working in a bio lab, for sure.
Right.
Yes.
When standing on gravel for a photo shoot, you need steel-toed boots that are brand new that your staff just handed you 5 minutes before the photo shoot.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's not a matching hard hat.
That's like the guys that show up on a construction site that you get a lot of flack if you show up on a construction site and all of your tools are new, your shoes are new. It's like, oh, you've never worked, have you?
Yeah.
You
got no paint on your pants.
Yeah.
Exactly right. No splattering. Okay, so let's sum up. The CDC has approved this now without data supporting that it's an emergency or that we need it, all of us, or that it's even safe. The American taxpayers will pay for this money laundering, again, through their upper arms. Health Canada, which has a big partner in Moderna, will only pay Moderna. And again, the taxpayers paid to hide all of this through the CIA because we're not allowed to know where it came from. We're just supposed to keep paying for it and rolling up our sleeves. Let us know what you think of this in the chat below.
All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. It's your hump day. Hump them if you've got them, consensually, of course. We're going to talk about this alien bodies story in the Mexican Congress. We'll show you the footage. We'll show you the testimony. We'll show you the evidence. You make your own decisions about it. It's very interesting. And the United States Congress is about to ramp up, of course, with their hearings on this. And Thursday, tomorrow, there's a NASA press conference. And Bill Nelson, the head of NASA, will be there. And there's a lot of speculation, like this could be a very big press conference. What is NASA about to announce this week? What could it be? A new committee to investigate UFOs? Is it going to be some sort of evidence that they're going to show off? Is it going to be some sort of a false flag thing? I mean, who knows? Anyway, we'll get to the bottom of that. Also, we're going to talk about masking up in Canada. We'll get there in a second. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Shopify, because a little while ago, I had the idea, hey, we wanted to launch our own store, right? We wanted to launch our Redacted storefront where, we could sell T-shirts and mugs and different things to really, support independent journalism and show your support for the show. And we didn't want to mark up the prices. We wanted to keep the prices like pretty much at cost to print them, very, very low. But anyway, it's a way to support the show. And we built the whole thing on Shopify. So we decided, well, that's a great way to do it. Very, very easy for us to set up and get our storefront up and running in a matter of days, where we felt like it looks really great. You can be set up with your own storefront in minutes. It's really that easy to get set up. And Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or a big IPO, Shopify is the only tool you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. In fact, you'd be stunned at how many of the stores you shop online are built on Shopify. So many of them. And it's amazing to be able to use Shopify and the easy integration to be able to sell across all of these countries using multiple platforms for, credit cards, to be able to, accept different forms of payment, all of that right in Shopify. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. It's a global force. They got Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, millions of other entrepreneurs across every size, across 170 countries, use Shopify. So sign up for a $1 per month trial at shopify.com/redacted. That's all lowercase. You have to put in all lowercase. So if you go to shopify.com/redacted to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/redacted. Again, shopify.com/redacted. Very easy to get up and running with your business online in no time at all. All right, well, we have alien bodies and we have DNA to prove it. Those aren't my words, but rather the words of scientists who stood before the Mexican Congress yesterday during a UFO hearing to show alien bodies and the DNA evidence that they have and x-rays of the bodies. I mean, x-rays, DNA evidence, and the bodies themselves. By the way, I should just point out, this is always what our viewers call out and talk about, right? I mean, prove it. Show us the bodies. Show us the craft. Yeah. Show us the materials. Show us the actual UFOs. So they literally, you know what? We're done with this now. We're not going to just show you pictures anymore and videos. We're going to wheel out the bodies in coffins and show them to you here in front of Mexican Congress. Here was the amazing moment. This is ufologist Jaime Maussan, who brought out what he says are small alien bodies into Congress, and he showed them off. So I'm going to talk over what he says here. So he says, there are beings, non-humans, who are our terrestrial evolution, that are not of our terrestrial evolution, that are after disappearing for 1,000 years. We don't know where they were. This is a subsequent evolution, according to the University National Autonomous Government of Mexico, who carried out the analysis of these bodies, of these carbon bodies. 14 of these beings are around 1,000 years old of antiquity. He says, that is, they are not beings of that were recovered in birds or crashes, meaning UFO crashes, that these were actual bodies that were buried in mines in Peru of diatoms or diatomaceous earth, which is a bug, basically a phytoplankton. So it was there with 17 million phytoplankton, and it was hidden in these caves. So they were sort of mummified as a result of being in these diatomous caves in Peru, and where they got these bodies.
Okay, can I point out the obvious, that it really looks like E.T.?
Does it look like E.T.?
Don't you think? Except the smaller head.
Isn't that what Steven Spielberg based it on? Like the idea that, based on eyewitness testimony, that's what the idea for E.T. came from?
I have no idea.
I don't know the exact.
You know what I saw? It looks like, if you look at it, it looks like you even see the prints from like clay. It looks like somebody made it out of
Does
clay.
it? Well, we have some photos and we also have some more video here we're going to show here, so you guys can make the determination of it. So Jaime Maussan was under oath and addressed members of the Mexican government and U.S. officials, briefing them about the findings. He said that the UFO specimens were recently studied at the Autonomous National University of Mexico, where scientists analyzed DNA evidence using radiocarbon dating. So, these are some of the... So here they took them out of these coffins, lifted them up, and showed off the bodies here. And, these do look very similar to some of the Nazca bodies from Peru that were debunked back in 2017. Now, and Jaime Maussan was involved in that. Gaia TV at the time was working on a big feature where they were going to show off these bodies that they had found, these Nazca Peruvian bodies from 2017. These are not those, but those were then found to not be, those were human, 100% human after they did the DNA tests. However, they did find like metallic objects inside of those bodies, which were they couldn't identify. So these are the new bodies. Okay. But when I was doing the analysis and looking at comparative from the 2017, they look very, very similar. I'll show those in a second here. So they used DNA evidence using radiocarbon dating. After comparisons were made to other DNA samples, they say that over 30% of the specimen's DNA was unknown. X-rays of the specimens were also shown during this testimony, and experts testifying under oath that one of the bodies seemed to have eggs inside. So here, you can look at these photos a little bit more closely here. And yeah, here are the photos of the eggs, they say, inside the body. They say that there are eggs inside of here, and they had showed off multiple X-rays of the brain, of the body itself, the body cavity. And what are these so-called eggs inside of the body, according to the scientists? Again, these are scientists who do this for a living. They're presenting their evidence. This is not me. This is them. Now, as I mentioned before, that Jaime Maussan was associated with this alien discovery, which was later found out to be these 5 mummies in Peru in 2017 were later shown to be human children after DNA analysis, but they had elongated skulls. And from what my memory, here are those Nazca from Peru. These are the 2017 Nazca aliens. And here's a close-up of them as well. And they had like 3 fingers as well. Don't they look similar? I mean, to me, they look similar.
I think they look damn near identical
to the ones that we're now seeing brought before Congress in Mexico. So if these were human, but again, what they're saying is that the DNA analysis of these new ones that they have, these 14 or so, are non-human, and there's 30% of the DNA is not of this earth. Okay. And there's some sort of, weird body structure and eggs in the body cavity, etc. I will tell a little story. I went out to Gaia TV in Boulder, Colorado, and when I was there in 2017, I was there during this revelation about these Nazca mummies. And I talked to a number of their staff members about them, specifically as they were working on this project. They were very excited about this project. They were very excited about what they were learning in Peru. And they were doing a lot of promotional videos. They did they had that whole documentary series and so forth. And of course, they were saying they believed internally that these were in fact aliens. And then the DNA results were coming out showing that these were not. But I remember it being at Gaia at the time when I was there. I didn't work there, but I was there behind the scenes for a little while and talking to those individuals. And they really thought that this was the big story. Like they really, really thought that this was, and they were working with Jaime directly. And so, but then it got debunked and then it kind of fizzled out. And so I don't know, are we about to see a repeat of the 2017 incident? I mean, he's testifying under oath. Right, these scientists are testifying under oath in front of Congress there that these are the DNA results, and these bodies were found in these caves in these sort of fossilized conditions. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, you'd have to think there's a way that we read DNA because we have DNA, so they have machines and everything set up to read our DNA, and so maybe there's been advances. But how would they know that it was like if it doesn't have the same structure? Like, what are they bringing into to even see a structure of DNA? You know what I mean? Like, so. For them to make, what I'm getting at is the conclusion in 2017, if there's been advances in the technology to where they can see DNA, maybe that's the difference.
I don't know. I mean 2017.
They've had that.
Yeah, go ahead.
They've had the human genome sequence for quite a while.
So they know. They can recognize the human genome. Now, if they're seeing that 30% of it is not human, right? They're saying, well, this is not part of the human genome. We know the full mapping of the human genome, to Philip's point. So now what is this 30%? That's it's not of this earth. We don't have anything in our database to recognize this. It's interesting. It's an interesting moment. It's interesting that Congress is, of course, taking up this again. Nancy Mace releasing a video over the past 24 hours, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who was on the UAP committee hearing, saying, we will absolutely want to be pushing more for this. We also heard from other members of Congress over the past 24 hours that are pushing more for this. So are we about to hear some sort of larger disclosure? Why are we hearing about this now? Are we hearing about this? Now, remember, these are Republicans, right? So if you might be saying, well, this is a distraction because of impeachment proceedings, right? Well, these are Republicans that are pushing for this. So separate from a Biden impeachment, right? And you have NASA coming out tomorrow with a big press conference, and Bill Nelson, head of NASA, will be there. So we'll be keeping our eye on exactly what this means. What is NASA going to announce? Are they going to announce their own committee to investigate UFOs? Which would be like the fifth committee now that we've got. Like we've got Pentagon, we've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got NASA also.
I mean, and if these are the aliens that are coming to Earth, are we not going to be the biggest bullies in the world? It's going to look like we're killing babies if we attack them with Space Force.
Well,
Space Force.
Yeah.
With their Space Force just got their new huge increased budget also. Again, I want anyone who's new to this show, who's never watched this before, I want you to understand something. Like, I really believe that they are using the fear factor of whatever, these craft are, human, man-made or not, that have been used to, reverse engineering these craft that we have in our possession. And they're using it, members of Congress and the Pentagon are going to use it as a fear factor in order to get more money for the military-industrial complex. That's exactly my position on this. I believe that 100%. And so it's very important to decouple these things. Yes, they do exist. Yes, we've been reverse engineering them. But yes, they're also using them for nefarious purposes, and they want to get more money out of us. So they're going to scare us with some big events. I've been hearing from some insiders that are really worried about big false flag events. Some insiders who've sent me information, they're really trying to warn us. They're like, please let your audience know. They really believe false flag events are coming in a big way, that they're going to use sort of 9/11 style false flag events to scare us into things.
All right. Well, let's all keep a cool, level head about it then, huh?
Keep our eyes out for any big false flag events that might unfold very, very soon. They're drumming up the interest in all of that. So let us know your thoughts on that in the comments below. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday.
Yes, we're going to tell you about Canada and how you need to wear a mask or prepare to face the consequences from the police. Are you going to have any more freedom this time around than you did last time? I don't know. Let's take odds. We're also going to bring you an update on the border crisis with Michael Yon. All of that and more. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo. And look, if you need a great way to start learning how to trade and start investing, Moomoo is the perfect platform to do that. And look, right now, they're giving away 16 free stocks. So let me just point this out. Even if you never do anything else with this account, you just open it and you make your initial deposit and you treat it like a savings account and you're like, I'm never going to trade stocks. Well, then why wouldn't you open it, in my opinion, and get the free stocks and let them grow? Because they're giving away a Google and or a Tesla stock. Not and. They're not giving you get one or the other. So you might get a Google stock or you might get a Tesla stock in your badge of 16 stocks that you get, which is amazing. Because I don't know, can you check the price of Tesla stock today? And look up Google stock also. I'll tell you that in a second. Natalie's going to look
$268.84.
For what? For what?
Tesla.
Okay, Tesla's at 200, and then Google is probably like what, 1,000 some?
134.
Oh, 134. Okay, I'm thinking of Amazon. But anyway, a couple of $100 on a stock that you get for just opening the account and letting it sit there and do nothing. So you can let it sit there and grow, all for opening your Moomoo account. And they've just got an amazing platform. I love their app, and I love using it on my iPhone. I have alerts set for the different companies that I invest in and different commodity stocks, oil, gas, and things like that I invest in, different mineral stocks. So I get alerts when different things happen with the company. They've got earnings calls, all that sort of stuff. So the app is really, really great. Give it a try today. Just go to redacted.inc/Mumu. That's how you get those 16 free stocks. You have to use that URL. Again, it's redacted.inc/Mumu.
All right, well, mask up, Canada. Dust off your winter boots, your toque. Is that how you say that? The
toque? Yeah.
Your toque and your mask, because you're going to need all of those things. The Canadian health minister also says that it's time to do that. She is the same person who has said that she's all for arrests and ankle bracelets for pandemic rule breakers, and it's better to apologize later. Do the severe thing and apologize later. Like, oops, sorry we arrested you for not wearing a mask. We shouldn't have done that. But
so, so Canada's telling everyone, mask up or you could face arrest.
Well, we saw arrests during the Canadian trucker envoy for protests of vaccine requirements. So, Canadians didn't have civil rights that the rest of us envied. Let's just put it that way. Do you think that at this time around they will? What are the odds? Let's put some odds on it, right? If you're betting who is going to be the next free during the next round of COVID, Canada's not at top of the list. Not even close, right? No one envies Canada's laws, I would say. Well, if you do, let me know why. Why do you envy Canada's laws? Okay, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know what I would do? I would start a massive campaign, and I would buy a ton of Guy Fawkes masks and have everybody buy them that was on board and wear those as our masks.
What is that, like a costume mask?
For the V from Vendetta. Am I saying it V from?
V for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's one thing you could do.
That's civil. Yeah. You have like an army of Guy Fawkes walking around.
All right. Well, take a look at this public health briefing in Canada this week. They are all in masks. And here is Canada's chief public health officer. It's their Fauci, we'll say. This is Dr. Theresa Tam saying, everyone should be ready to look like this. Watch.
Just as a follow-up, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just wanted to take note. You're all masking, which is lovely to see, of course. But most government ministers are not now. Most MPs are not. Most people on the street are not masking. Is there any specific guidance on that going forward at this point?
Yeah, it's Theresa Tam. So it is a layer of protection. We hope people have developed the habit to be able to use masks as needed during the respiratory virus season, not just for COVID, but for all the other respiratory pathogens that will be transmitted around this time. So I do think now is the time to get your masks ready if you don't already have them. In our own particular context, we certainly in our area, there's been an uptick in some of the COVID-19 indicators. For me personally, there have been cases around, even my work colleagues. So that's one of the reasons why we are wearing masks today.
Okay, so
I love
some
that reporter,
follow-up
by the way.
questions. Yeah. Oh, it's so lovely that you're all in masks.
That reporter, like,
that's nice fall fashion.
Yeah, hi. This is Clayton from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I just want to say it's lovely. You guys are all masked up again. I hope you guys are all vaxxed. It's great to see. Now I have a question. Why are other people not masked up? Really? Anyway, go ahead.
Like you really like your trench coat.
I was going to say it. She really committed wearing that jacket that looks like virus particles.
Right.
Right.
It's pandemic chic is what we will call that. Okay. Now, it should be noted that Dr. Theresa Tam is a World Health Organization veteran, and she still serves on WHO committees. She is, incidentally, on the monkeypox committee, in case you did not know that. This is the same person who said that people should be arrested if they broke pandemic rules or even use ankle bracelets. Now, to be clear, she didn't say this about COVID. She said this in 2010 about a possible monkeypox outbreak. But to be sure, I had opinions 12 years ago that I don't have anymore. But if I were Canadians, I would really want to make sure that she doesn't still think this is appropriate.
If there are people who are non-compliant, there are definitely laws and public health powers that can quarantine people in mandatory settings. is potential. You could track people, put bracelets on their arms, have police and other setups to ensure quarantine is undertaken.
Yeah, put ankle bracelets.
No, she said on their arms.
Oh, arms, like the concentration camps.
To be preemptive and precautionary and take the heat of people thinking you might be overreactionary, get ahead of the curve, and then think about whether you've overreacted later. But it's such a serious situation that I think decisive early action is the key.
Well, we realize Adolf acted,
Yeah.
Police.
Why not just shoot the people and then apologize later?
Proof of vaccination. Those who refuse to cooperate are taken away to temporary detentions.
Oh yeah, set up police checkpoints, and if your bracelet doesn't comply with the order, you'll be taken to a prison. You'll be hauled off. That's
she
what they
says overreaction is the key, and it's better to just overreact and then say you're sorry later if it turned out to be, not the right thing to do. Sorry. Like Philip just said, well, what if we just shoot him? Like, what if that happens? Oh, sorry, you weren't wearing a mask. But now, again, she didn't actually say this about COVID. She said this in 2010. I, again, would want to be damn sure she doesn't feel that way now. She didn't do that much better, though, during the COVID pandemic. This was her advice to people who were lucky enough to have a sex life during the pandemic. She said, stop kissing and wear a mask while having sex to prevent COVID transmission. No analysis of that.
Yeah, don't worry about the STD or anything else.
Masks are the new condoms.
Don't worry about any of the bodily fluids. That has nothing. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Just make sure you're wearing a mask. Stop kissing people.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, these are the people in charge.
Right. Now, I could launch into many studies about the effectiveness of masks. We've covered that before. I could show you the dangers of masking. We've covered that in depth too. I think what's worth seeing here is that some people don't want to look at that data and still think masks are a virtuous thing to do, and they applaud it. For instance, this tweet of @MeetJess saying this is how it should be. Well, she said this is how should be.
So basically saying all these people being masked. Let me read it. Dr. Theresa Tam and the entire panel masked for the vaccine briefing. This is how it should be.
This is how should be.
Well,
but yes,
Remember when I sent you guys that video of my Twitter feed? Go back to that image and look at that. How many shares and how many likes and stuff that post has from an unverified person? Like, it's like they're elevating that message on Twitter big time.
Yes, David believes, because he does not follow very many pro-maskers, that pro-mask tweets are being elevated because he sees them in his feed as in a disproportionate way than he really would have otherwise seen. And so...
Elon?
Yeah.
Want to answer to that? I'd be curious about that.
This kind of thing, right? Saying like, yes, we think this is awesome that they're masking. We all should be masking too. She wants that @MeetJess, right? So, some people are super ready to rock this Mask 2 look coming out to a Canadian near you this fall. And you may think, whatever, let those people wear masks if you want to. But given how few choices Canadians were given during the pandemic, how long do you think it will be optional?
Right, until it's mandated. And when you go into any building or make public transportation or anything, it's going to be mandated.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you literally have the FDA. I'm just like a side message here because I think it's maybe related. The FDA just comes out now and says that the common cold over-the-counter decongestants don't work.
I mean, work to what? To put you to sleep?
I mean, they're like, hey, so these don't work now. The timing of all of this is pretty remarkable, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Like, wow, the FDA is weighing in and saying something doesn't work. When will they weigh in and say something else doesn't work, like the vaccines?
Right. And yet, Peter McCullough gets in trouble for saying that nasal spray is a good idea, like the natural saline solution.
Yeah.
So... yeah.
Okay, so now FDA is laying the groundwork. The timing of it is perfect, right? Just as we're about to start getting like new vaccine mandates or COVID mandates, masking mandates, the FDA is basically saying, hey, those like over-the-counter stuff? Stop using that. Stop using it. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Look.
It's almost
bastard.
as if Canada's the testing ground, because it's like they test everything in Canada, and then all these people are like, that's going to come here, that's going to come here. And then they paint those people as conspiracy theorists, so they've ruined their reputations, and then it comes here, and nobody says anything like, well, they were right, but next.
Yeah, well, because it's already, it's a limited hangout, right? You already sort of get this sort of limited release of this information where you get to paint these people a certain way, and then it comes here, and
I just don't understand this shared assumption that masks work or are healthy.
Like, why wouldn't she?
For me, that ship has sailed, right?
The data is in. Yeah,
the data is pretty incontrovertible, and so I don't know why we're swallowing this without any, like, that reporter says that this is lovely to see masking. The reporter should ask questions about data showing that masks don't prevent the transmission, not just of COVID, but other things. And they're not. So again, we'll see how free Canada remains. I think if we were to make a list of the countries that had the least amount of freedom in the world during the pandemic, Canada would be at the top. And that's, to me, an undesirable list to be on.
Well, the United States is losing its freedoms as our open border problem continues. We're going to join Michael Yon down in Panama, journalist Michael Yon, who went back to Panama because the influx of illegal immigrants coming across the border into the United States is increasing. He's seeing upwards of 50 to 60 buses per day leaving the Darien Gap in Panama, bringing people from all over the world straight into the United States. Thousands of people per day. And so Michael Yon is back in Panama. We're going to check in with him for a report down there at these camps. And there's new camps being built, by the way. So if you think the Biden administration is doing anything to stop the illegal immigration crisis in the United States, they are not. In fact, they are helping it, making it worse. So we'll talk to Michael in just a second. But first, let's tell you about our store. I mentioned our store a few moments ago. If you go to redactedstore.com, you can support independent journalism. You can support what we do here on this show. You can pick up a hoodie in time for fall. You can pick up some hats. You can pick up a mug for your hot cocoa or your coffee or your hot tea. I love my hoodie. I love my Redacted hoodie, and it's starting to get fall temperatures outside now. It's perfect hoodie weather to take the dog for a walk. My favorite hat is scrolling up on your screen right now. My gray hat, my gray Redacted hat. I love that sort of the faded look. So I love that hat. You can pick that up, the Redacted hat. David, you have the one with the red, I think the red brim, right? I think that's your
I have
speed.
like 3 of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
super
can I
nice.
just point out, I just want to point out we're working on some really cool stuff right now, Grim and I. So we'll have
For the
some
store.
new stuff hitting very soon. Yep. Some new
Okay,
t-shirt styles and all kinds of cool stuff. Jackets.
Cool. In time for Christmas and fall, pick up some gifts now. And if you want your basic line, we've still got that. Go to redactedstore.com. And again, we don't jack the prices up at all. We try to keep them right almost at cost, the printing costs, and very little profit. So we really keep the cost down just for the cost of printing. Again, check them out. Redactedstore.com is the place to go. Redactedstore.com. Well, Democrat Mayor Eric Adams says Manhattan is going to collapse under the weight of illegal immigrants. Democratic leaders around the country are saying this, who once pushed for open borders and sanctuary cities, now saying that we are in trouble and freaking out about this. Journalist Michael Yon is in the Darien Gap, back in Panama, at the center of the flow of these illegal migrants who are coming from Panama, flowing up to the United States. And Michael says it's only gotten worse. And Michael joins us live right now from Panama. Michael, good to see you.
Good to see you too. ¿De dónde son? Venezuela. Ahí. San Vicente. No tengo. All right.
So, Michael, those are illegal immigrants coming through right near where you are at this camp.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you're seeing there now in Panama that you just arrived back in the Darien Gap?
Yeah, this is San Vicente camp. This is the camp that Mayorkas came to in April of 2022. He landed actually in 3 Black Hawk, right there, about 500 away through those trees. He landed there, and I waited right here on this road for him to pass by me. And Mayorkas went into this camp here, San Vicente. That was April of 2022, and I was droning it when he went in. And so I've got that footage, and I put up the footage when he came this year in May, side by side, and you can see this camp is remarkably bigger, at least twice as big now. And this is just one camp. There's many camps in Panama. This place is growing. There goes some of the buses right there to go pick up some of the aliens. Yesterday, about 50 or 60 buses took aliens from the Darien Gap up to Costa Rica. So in the past, you might get a few hundred people a day. Right now, sometimes 5,000 and 6,000 a day. And one camp that we were in yesterday was more than 4,000 just in that camp. And that's called Las Blancas. And that doesn't include this camp here, which is San Vicente. But again, there's many other camps. There's an old military adage that says, never let them build camps because they never go away. Actually, a retired colonel just sent me that about an hour ago when I was out in the jungle. And you may have heard over the years. And it's true. And not only are they building the camps, they're increasing the size here. And it's with U.S. money. Our flags are in these camps. When I say our flags, they're not flying, but they have painted flags. Our flags are in this camp right here, San Vicente camp. You know,
so these
and
camps.
The embassy comes down here. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no. The embassy comes down there, and the U.S. tax dollars are going to fund these camps, and you're seeing an explosion of people coming through this area that are heading up to the United States. So where are they coming from? Where are these individuals coming from? And who's down there doing this work to build these new camps?
At least 140 countries are coming through the Darien Gap. And again, that traffic here is highway right there, just like
That's Highway 1 right there. So the people traveling right along that highway straight to the United States.
That's right. I would walk out there, but I might lose signal. But that's Highway 1. And so you can, Pan American Highway, right? That's the main artery to the United States right there. And Panama is only increasing, and the flows are increasing. Right now, they're beginning to break ground on another jungle camp. And, you know, there's an old military saying is never let them establish camps. When they establish camps, that's it. They never go away, right? Right now, I'm seeing huge amounts of Venezuelans. It's like every barrio in Venezuela seems to be dumping out. And a lot of, did you see those photos I put up yesterday? The guy with the AK-47, that dude, you know, his whole face is tatted up. His whole body's tatted up. You know, and he's, you know, acting like a gangster. And the whole camps are filled with people like that. Not that all of them in the camps are like that. They're not. Many of them are actually children and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of very clear gangsters and a lot of people with obvious mental illness. Like, for instance, I just left the jungle to come back here so I could get signal and come on with you. And there was one of the migrant women, clearly crazy as it gets, was just stripping down and going into the river, singing loudly and just, you know, flailing around, like, you know. So, I mean, it is quite serious out there. In fact, the people that they went out in the jungle with today, we just had breakfast with them. They are the Centerfront, Panamanian Centerfront is sort of like their border patrol / army / police. It's like there's no equivalent in the United States. In fact, there's one right there. They're very professional. These guys are super professional. So they got into that firefight that last time that Ben and Oscar went into the jungle and smoked a couple of the guys and that sort of thing. But everything was fine. And you know, they're very good at their jobs, but they're overwhelmed. And so the Centerfront's like, you know, we don't have enough people. We got a lot of jungle, and we're just being overwhelmed. The Panamanian government is at wit's end. They say they can't stop people coming through, but we actually know during the pandemic they did stop it. I mean, there was nobody in this camp during the pandemic. And so, I mean, they just stopped it like a water spigot.
So they're getting full support from the United States. They're getting full support from the United States to keep it flowing and to keep these buses running. How many buses would you say you're seeing on a daily basis that are filled with illegal immigrants that are being bussed up to the United States?
A Centerfront lady yesterday told us about 60 went yesterday. So about 60 yesterday.
Jeez.
Yeah. And these are big luxury buses. Yeah. Now, just a few months ago, it was only about, on a heavy day, about 40. So that was on a heavy day. And so she said yesterday it was about 60. And it is clearly increasing. Like, I can see the camps are growing. Like in Las Blancas camp, where I was just at this morning and yesterday, you can see that they're putting in more additions to it right now. But it's totally, it's Lord of the Flies. You know, Costa Rica, you know, Panama is being destabilized as well. So this is a big deal. I mean, Panama is important to the United States, not to mention important for Panama and a lot of the rest of the world. First of all, we got the Panama Canal here. This highway, Highway 1, goes right over the Panama Canal. So if you go on this highway, you'll end up over the Panama Canal. So this is this highway is an artery to the United States, as is the Panama Canal, obviously, for our trade and our Navy going back and forth between the Pacific and the Atlantic. And right now I think I hear some thunder. This is a rainforest. So and actually there's some big water problems here now. As you may have seen, a lot of ships are backed up because they can't get through the canal, not enough water. That's a separate issue. But the bottom line is Panama is a very strategic place. That's why I spend so much time in Panama and so much time. I've probably spent 6 months here since Biden was installed, right? And I keep going back and forth between places like Netherlands and Japan and just keep vital terrain for what's happening with the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party and others. There's Chinese everywhere. This camp right here, San Vicente, has got, I don't know how many Chinese in it right now, but hundreds.
Wow.
Often they stay in this hotel, but they're often in this hotel with me, but they're not here right now. Actually.
What about the health concerns? Of course, you were texting me just the other day about some of the outbreaks of different diseases and viruses that the Panamanian government are seeing there. Can you talk about that? And of course, that is coming through Panama, then right into the United States as well, is it not?
Yeah. In fact, there's encephalitis now here and malaria. Now, this is place. There's always been malaria here. This is Panama, famous for yellow fever and malaria and that sort of thing. But actually, the malaria outbreaks are much more intense now than they've been in recent times. And it's actually for those malaria experts out there. I know there's not many, but there are some. This is the falciparum type, or that's one of the types here, Vivex and falciparum. And obviously, that's a pretty big deal. The falciparum, Plasmodium falciparum, is the one that really knocks people flat and kills a lot, right? There's different types of malaria, and just like there's different types of almost every disease in the world, that comes in, whether it's a virus or a bacteria or whatever, or in this case, anyway, not to go into and by the way, malaria. This whole canal was very difficult to build because of the mosquitoes, right? Now, we didn't know that mosquitoes were the big vector for things like yellow fever and malaria for years. In fact, the name malaria, comes from Latin meaning bad air. The doctors for centuries thought that malaria came from the putrid smelling air. So that's how it got the name malaria. And so anyway, it's not, but often where the mosquitoes grow is where the air happens to stink, in the swamplands and that sort of thing.
Are you seeing any U.S. officials from the embassy or otherwise that have been coming through that area saying we need to stop this?
No, it's the opposite. I mean, our embassy is in the neck deep in pushing this. I mean, our ambassador was at this camp with Mayorkas, with Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. They both came together. They came on the same three Blackhawks, right? So I mean, this is a full government approach to destroying the United States. And I'm not jumping out of the Overton window, I hope, in saying that, because it's quite obvious what's happening. It's quite obvious that, for instance, what's happening in New York. Some of us have been warning about this for years, and I know we sounded like loons. We get it. But this is what's happening. I remember with the Iraq Civil War, I was the first one that just kept saying over and over and over, month after month, this is a civil war. It was politically very inexpedient to talk about that in early 2005, right? And finally, by mid-2006, people started saying, actually, there is a civil war. Well, it was a big deal because you treat a civil war differently than you treat insurgency or whatever. There's different types of wars, just like there's different types of diseases, and you treat them differently, right? And so it was very important to call it what it was. This is a straight up invasion of the United States. It's happening in Europe. Europe is overwhelmed. Like Luxembourg, I spent, almost a couple of weeks there last year. And it's about almost 50%, not 1.5, almost 50% migrants in Luxembourg now. Used to be the jewel of Europe. Luxembourg, first time I went there was when I was in the Army, actually doing training. And it was, I couldn't believe it. It was such a nice, beautiful place. Now there's no way you would take your family there and let them run around alone, or even with you. I mean, it would be dangerous. Yeah, in Luxembourg City, that used to be the jewel of Europe.
Well, now this is what's happening in the United States, and you're hearing from Mayor Adams and others They are in a crisis right now, and it starts right there in Panama. So you're going to be down there for quite a while, tracking what's happening right now with this influx. We thought it might get better. We thought it might actually improve since your last visit there, and it's only gotten worse. So, Michael, what's on your agenda over the next few days down there?
I thought it was. You never heard me say I thought this was going to improve. I'm watching.
No, I think I'm just a hopeful. I think I'm just a hopeful person. I thought, well, maybe the Panamanian government will step up. They're seeing this health crisis. They're seeing the national media. They're seeing a lot of the media attention on the Darien Gap now. That all of these migrants are flowing right through this area. There's a new renewed awareness about it. But instead, the opposite has happened. They're building a new camp.
Listen, I'll go on record right now and say, and again, I've said this with you before, Clayton. Go back and just throw a dart at previous things that I've written, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and see how they played out, right? I know they sound crazy at times. However, put this on your calendar. 2024, I will be very surprised if fewer than 1 million people come right up this highway right here, Highway 1. I'll be very surprised if fewer than 1 million come up. Right? Last month, it was 82,000, right? And that's rainy season. This is the season when usually it kind of trickles off. It's not. The routes through the jungle, they're still, people are dying right now. As we speak, there's people dying in that jungle, and they will be dead within the next few hours. And it's just like leaves falling off the tree in the fall. And there's so many deaths out there. In fact, when Oscar and Ben, we just put them off into the Piraguas, which is the dugout canoes with the center front, which is like the Border Patrol. Their mission probably is going to end up getting cut short because they're going to probably cut bodies, and the center has to recover the bodies, right? If it doesn't get cut short by running across bodies, then they'll come out in about 4 days, and then we're going to go right back into the jungle with them, actually. But it's just, I'm watching the inputs. I'm watching gas supplies and nitrogenous fertilizers. So I'm watching this in the context of a global view, right? And from a global view, the human osmotic pressure, the HOP, is clearly increasing. Some of that's organic, some of it's intentional by World Economic Forum, CCP, and others. And the bottom line is, this place, Panama, will be lucky to survive. Because listen, if Nicaragua shuts the border, or Costa Rica, because Panama has borders with Colombia and Costa Rica, right? But Costa Rica borders Panama and Nicaragua, right? If Nicaragua closes the border, then Costa Rica is going to close the border, and then this place will just fill up, right? And then this place will, I'm telling you, it won't survive in the form that it's in now. There's no way. There's too many other pressures going on, right? And so weaponized migration is an old tactic, an old strategy as well. And that's what's happening. It's weaponized migration. When I say weaponized migration, it doesn't mean you necessarily come in with weapons. It means you just come in, like the Goths in Rome, right? Just show up and be there. And again, the people coming through, these are not like physicists and engineers and that sort of thing. If there are, those are sprinkles. What you're mostly getting is clearly barrio people. You'll come down and see it. I'll take you out there. It's pretty unbelievable.
Well, Michael Yon in the jungle or near the jungle, about to head back into the Panamanian jungle. He's going to have a Starlink set up, so he'll be able to report from the jungle, and we will bring you those reports over the coming days. Michael, we're excited about that. Thank you for shining a light on a story that no one else is really covering, but you. You're doing an amazing job, and we're glad that we can able to give voice here on the show about where this starts, where this flows from Panama all the way up to the United States, covering both sides of it. Michael, thanks so much for joining us, as always.
Thank you. I should have the Starlink on the 14th and should have it deployed by the 15th, and I'll have you out in one of those camps. You're not going to believe what you're going to see.
Well, we'll bring that to our audience. So, Michael, thank you so much for your bravery down there and continued great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you so much, Michael, he's really an amazing journalist, former member of the Special Forces, and to be able to travel around the world, and he's constantly going in these hot zones, going to Panama, then going into different areas of experiencing famine, going to the Netherlands to see what's going on with the farmers, traveling the world and bringing us these reports. We're excited because he's about to have this Starlink set up in the jungle. So he'll be able to bring these live reports to us from the jungle, and we'll be able to talk to him there away from cell signals, because there's no cellular service, there's no Wi-Fi, and now he'll be able to go into some of these hot zones and really share that information with us. So that's really exciting.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That does it for Redacted. We will be back here tomorrow, the same time in the same place. Remember, Redacted is live Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. It's our pleasure to be with us. Make sure that you share these videos, hit the like and subscribe button, and subscribe to the newsletter. You can find it all at redacted.inc. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow, everyone.